Nathan has started the recording again. That's good. Now I've lost a few people. Did have 28 before. Who were missing? Do a post-lunch roll call. Okay. We'll make a start. Are we okay, Ruth? I'm just looking to see who's doing the next papers, making sure they're here. Great. Right. Welcome back, everybody. So a slightly later lunch, but we are an agenda item ahead. So we have gained a little bit of time. So we are now on to item number 9, and this is our Public Bodies Joint Working Act. So these are our 2 annual performance reports, one for the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership and one for the Argyll and Bute Health and Social Care Partnership. So 9A is the Highland Partnership report, and I'll invite Pam Kremen to speak to this item, please.
Thanks, Chair. So yes, pleased to bring to the board this fully integrated annual performance report, which gives good examples of our service delivery across integrated adult and children's services on behalf of the lead agencies. There's a full set of performance metrics in response to the National Health and Wellbeing Outcomes, the National Integration Indicators, the Integrated Services Planning Board Performance Management Framework. We talked about that a bit this morning in terms of the children's paper that was presented, and also the Together We Care outcomes and the read across to the National Health and Wellbeing outcomes therein. So the report itself is retrospective. It looks at our performance during year 2021. We've already had focused discussions today on adult social care and the children's plan, but clearly there's a suite of indicators that shows our performance, and there's also a really good narrative around where our services have been performing and the things that we've been doing to provide that assurance to the public about the status of our services and about the development of our services. Key to that as well is to acknowledge our staff and how they've contributed to this. So it's a report with all of our information in one place in terms of our integration arrangements. So really pleased to be taking it and really pleased to be having it to refer to going forward, and also underpinning the work we're doing around our joint strategic plan, which is just nearing the end of its engagement process. So today the board's asked to take substantial assurance from the report and approve the report. It's already been to our internal board committees. We had a session at the Health and Social Care Committee. I'm going to take it to the Joint Monitoring Committee tomorrow at their meeting. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. So I'll open up for any questions or comments, and I don't know perhaps if any members of the Highland Health and Social Care Committee wanted to throw in any observations or any richness from the discussion had there, but I will open it up. Jerry.
Yep, thank you, Sarah, and thanks to Pam. We had an excellent discussion, I think, concerning this report at the Social Care Committee, the Health and Social Care Committee, and it was very well received. I think Pam's touched on several of the factors. Before we look at some of the content in terms of it was fully integrated. We've got the performance information there, and I think that there was a great credit to Pam in working with her team. I think the presentation this year really has moved forward a lot this year, and I think it was generally recognised as being quite a readable report, which often these things are not. They're quite dry, but I think that this was very good. So I think you got a good overview of the full integrated position, which I think was ideal. I think what I really took out of it, and I'll let other members of the committee talk for themselves, I think it really reflected the as you would expect, it really reflected the information which we've been getting presented to across the course of the year. So there was no surprises in it. Even those areas where we don't do as well as we would like to do, we were aware of them. So there was which is always very good, and we were very honest and open in the report where we would like to be and where we would like to go to. But I think just as importantly in there, and I'll use psychological therapies as a really good example of that. There's a really big success story in there, and we were fortunate at the committee where we discussed the report. We were having the drug and alcohol recovery service presentation and report as well. And again, I think there was a very good news story in there in terms of how we're using the medically assisted treatment guidelines and actually the impact of the non-medical prescribers. So I think for me, this presented quite a rich picture, and I think Pam is absolutely right. I think it is a document which you can refer to and you can move forward and you can get some good information out of that. And I look forward to using it and seeing how we move forward across the year. So I've got no specific questions on it. I had plenty of opportunities to raise questions with Pam at the Health and Social Care Committee, and I can assure you she'll be well able to answer them all. But I thought it was a really good report and stands us in good stead moving forward. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jerry. I would agree. It was a very readable report, and actually I really enjoyed the balance. It clearly sets out the challenges, but I thought it was really helpful to pull out the key achievements as well, and where our staff across the partnership have been working really hard in some very difficult circumstances to deliver some excellent work. So I thought that was some really helpful balance when reading through, to be able to see the achievements as well as the challenges and the areas that we have for improvement too. Okay, any other questions for Pam? Other Pam, please.
No questions, just to echo, I guess, what's been said. It's great to see it coming forward at the level it's at now. We obviously had a hiatus during the pandemic, and we had 2 previous reports that were a starter for 10 and trying to get back into the swing of things, but we didn't necessarily have everything lined up in the way that we have now. And I think that kind of speaks to the journey we've been on and where we've got to. So I think where we're at with the strategy coming forward and the plans that will have to come out of that in the circumstances that we're in, it's great to have this backdrop to work from. So yeah, big thank you to all the team that have contributed to this, and Pam for her leadership.
Thank you.
And of course, yeah, so some of us, it's one of those reports, isn't it? So it went through the Highland Health and Social Care Committee, and it's come to us today, and it's going to go to the JMC tomorrow. So some of us have seen it lots and lots, but it is interesting to take these reports, through the different groups, because you get a slightly different flavour of conversation, and people with different perspectives examine the same data and come up with different things to ask. So I think that's really helpful as well. Okay, so no other questions or comments for Pam on that report. So the other half of the jigsaw is our Argyll and Bute Health and Social Care Partnership report, and I will invite Fiona to speak to this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as you'll see in the cover paper, as expected by the Public Bodies Joint Working Regulations, I'm asking the board to note the contents of the annual performance report for Argyll and Bute. In line with the scheme of delegation, the Argyll and Bute report covers health and wellbeing outcomes, as we've just heard for the Highland one, but also children and young people's outcomes, and by the nature of all children's services being delegated within Argyll and Bute HSCP. And it also includes progress against the current strategic plan, for Argyll and Bute, which is 2022 to 2025. So it's in essence the first year of that 3-year joint strategic planning cycle. The report was approved at the Integrated Joint Board on the 31st of May 2023. Hint, it was a while ago. So don't ask me too many questions because I was closer to the detail then than now, but that's fine. But substantial assurance is offered along with the request for the board to note the content. Thanks.
Thank you, Fiona. And yeah, as you said, it was a little while ago in IGB, and we looked at this when I was still around that table, I think, just. Okay, questions or comments for Fiona, or I guess even more broadly around two of them, I guess. We could ask a very big question about our two partnership reports. Graham, I'll bring you in.
Yes, I was actually just going to say, Sarah, it should be you that's commenting more about this, given that it was your tenure. But just from the IGB board perspective, it was even though it does seem much more than just 3 months ago, it seems as we covered it ages ago. But no, it gives a very good summary of a position looking back. It's a very helpful document. It reminds us of how much goes on, and just the activity that goes just chuntering on in the background. All these people that are spread across that wide area who are delivering services day in, day out, round the clock. And it's I don't think we should ever take for granted the kind of good things that happen, and you know, that continue to happen. It also highlights what we still need to do, and of course, it's this is a bad analogy, but I'll give it. It's a bit like a leaky bucket. You know, the kind of issues just keep coming in anyway, regardless of how much we're battling to fill them, and that's clearly a challenge for us. There's obviously the demographic issue in Argyll, which fortunately I'm exempt from, but you know, we've got all these issues that are you know, facing us as an area, but I think it would also be. I think we should also reflect that you know, we do have a high caliber team leading, and I think, you know, we've certainly as a board we feel we're in good hands there. But we'll continue to probe and press and push ahead, and we look forward to continuing improvement. So yes, I'm supporting Fiona's presentation of that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, Pam.
Yeah, again, just to echo the thanks to Fiona and our team and our leadership. I guess what it does give us is the opportunity to look at the two reports and to look at the learning. So it's great.
Sorry, minor coughing fit. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so, and I think Fiona just picked up a really important point when she was introducing her half of the two, you know, the two reports there, is that there is a slight difference. So we are being offered substantial assurance for both, but we are being asked to approve the performance report for the Highland Partnership as the lead agency, and being asked to note the performance report for the Argyll and Bute Partnership because the approval happens within the IJB. So it's a small, it seems small, but it's an important distinction. So I just wanted to draw that out. And I will just check, is everybody happy with substantial assurance for both reports? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. So this moves us on now to item number 10. This is our winter preparedness. Now, I think Pam Kremen, I think you're going to introduce this, and then we'll be handing across to Lorraine. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So yes, in terms of our winter preparedness, then we've been working hard on developing our approach to the plan this year coming. So we've been doing that within the Highland Unscheduled Care Programme Board, and also in Argyll and Bute. They've also been developing their plan through their own governance structure. So this report focuses on the approach that we're taking for the Highland Partnership for this winter. So our Unscheduled Care Programme Board then has got the responsibility for supporting and facilitating the National Unscheduled Care Programme across the board. And also recently there has been a change to the programme delivery just around the portfolios in terms of the work guided by the Centre for Sustainability Delivery. So rather than the high impact changes, they focus down into 5 portfolio areas. So on the 23rd of August, Catherine Sutton and I led a consensus workshop for our joint senior leadership team that we've kind of renamed and reflected an integrated leadership team. So setting us up early in terms of planning, and going forward around how we want to tackle some of our particular issues that we've been referencing earlier today in the meeting around delayed discharge. So the 5 areas are community urgent care, flow navigation, virtual capacity in hospital at home, front door flow and optimising flow. So across these 5 areas, we had a consensus workshop to look at those areas, and that was led just before that with the National Winter Summit that Pam referred to earlier, which took place just the day before. So we're in a good place, and we've been learning from the approach that we took last year when we had a very robust approach again across the 2 senior leadership teams, good engagement and good pace around how we were taken forward and working through our winter planning process. So at that point, I'll hand you over to Lorraine to take us through the process. We're very much supported by the strategy and performance team around providing the data to make sure that we're data informed and that we can work at pace and do quick decision making in a reactive way as well as a planned way as we go into the winter period. So I'll pass you over to Lorraine. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Just in terms of our approach this year, as Pam has said, we've been working together on reviewing the approach that we took last year, and you'll remember that we called it the Winter Ready Action Plan, the RAP plan that we consulted on widely, and the approach was certainly welcomed last year by our clinical and care leaders about how clear it was in terms of the actions that we're going to take. So as Pam has reflected, we're going to adopt a similar approach this year that incorporates the pillars that they're called from the urgent and unscheduled care portfolios, but it'll also take cognizance of the Scottish Government's extant winter guidance and checklist that we have submitted just last week. So for our 6 key areas, we're focusing on redirect, reforming, looking at hospital at home, and looking at how we change the management of our complex patients, rapid assessment and capacity in ED, and supporting that SAS turnaround times, and protecting our ED capacity, as well as focusing on areas that have been in place for some time, like PDD. For respond, looking at our care at home capacity, care beds, and our community hospital occupancy. Whilst we're focusing on urgent and unscheduled care, we can't forget the impact of winter on our planned care activity. We've spoke about cancer earlier, so it's important that we continue to take actions to protect that. And importantly for our workforce, that we reassure and have got specific actions. So again, that is the same approach as we took last year, and we will have fully developed improvement plans for each of these areas that are in part strategic, but very much responding to the operational pressures that we've got. We will also think about that enabling actions. So OPEL's been in place in Raigmore for some time, and there is good work going on in community and mental health about how we develop that collaborative actions to relieve pressure across the system, and that will be part of our plan. As Pam has said, there'll be clear key performance indicators that of all the actions that I've just highlighted, that we have, that we review them on a weekly basis and look at areas where we can make further developments. There are 38 indicators that Scottish Government have produced that will be developed into discovery dashboards, but it's important that we tackle that early and support that improvement. We'll be working with Ruth in terms of that widespread comms across our system, and we've commenced that, and that was really important last year about our messaging. And as Pam's highlighted, we'll have that strategic, tactical and operational approach with that integrated SLT and weekly review of progress. And then finally, I know we're going to cover onto risk, but how we, I guess, assess that impact on quality of care and embed it in our risk and issues logs. That will be closely monitored over winter and will require close working like we did last year with our professional leads to monitor that and through our clinical and care governance systems. So I hope that gives you an overview of the process that we're taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. I will open up to questions, comments, observations. Susan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that, both people for presenting on that. Really interesting to see what you have to say. I mean, my comment, I suppose, is about the level of assurance, because I really note that it's a complex system, and that despite everything we're doing, we may still end up facing, you know, very difficult pressures. But from everything that you've said, from everything you've outlined and the detail that you've given us, I would really suggest that maybe the assurance level could be moderate. I think, you know, you're doing you know, and it's aligned back to what we were having our discussion about risk appetite. You know, we need to acknowledge that some of these things are really complex. We've got to give people permission to do a bit more. And I think what you've presented me is something much more than limited assurance.
Thanks, Susan. Anne.
I think Susan raises a really tricky issue there, because I thought this was a very good report, and I think that I've no doubts that our teams are doing everything that they possibly can to ensure the best outcome for both staff and patients over what's going to be a really challenging period. However, as the paper points out, and given the recent concerns that have been expressed in an escalated fashion about system pressures, I think it's clear that we are probably going to have some very tricky times. I had a question about that myself, but not quite the same as Susan's, which was, if we do accept limited assurance, should we be considering having updates on the winter plan at future board meetings? I think, you know, our assurance matrix requires us, when we accept limited assurance, to think about, you know, what further action we should perhaps be taking. And that's not to say that I'm not suggesting this from the point of view that I think there's anything more that we could be doing, but it's more just in terms of our assurance framework and how we're operating that. But I had, maybe if I could, well, I don't know, Sarah, whether you want to finish off on that particular issue about assurance, or whether, you know, before I come back on some other points that I had about the paper, or not.
So I think it would be, I think we should carry on the discussion, because the other things that people want to bring in might help us, you know, kind of firm up our thinking around the assurance level. So, Anne, did you want to come in with another?
Sorry, well, I had other points about the paper, but not about the assurance issue.
Okay, so about the assurance issue then, Pam, did you want to come in on that? Pam Cremin, yep.
Thanks, Chair. Just to reflect that Lorraine and Catherine and I did have a discussion around the assurance to submit with the paper, and I had said perhaps we should give the higher level of assurance because our process is very robust. We're learning from last year, but we can't really give the assurance on the process given the way that the status of some of our performance where we're going into the winter pressure. So we didn't want to, come into the discussion, without reflecting, some of the position of some of our performance data at the moment. So we felt that we should just offer limited assurance when first bringing this paper to the board. We have brought the learning from previous years into a board development session, but we felt for the first board meeting we should offer limited.
Thanks, Pam. And I think we have had similar discussions around this, not for winter preparedness, but other items, how assured are we around the plan and the process of the planning, and then how assured are we around our delivery or our ability to deliver?
Yes.
And they could be two very separate things. Okay, I'll take other comments and questions, and what we might do, Susan, is I think we'll come back to it at the end as well. So Jerry, I'll bring you in next.
Thank you, Sarah. I mean, I'd written down, I've got some comments on the assurance as well, but I think I'll wait until the discussion's over to see whether. I suppose for me it was. I've got some specific questions on the paper, but I think for me it's wrapped up in, I think, a discussion we've had several times today in terms of what are our measures of success in relation to winter. And what will be a good outcome for us? Is it, and I'm making this up, is it not to go to the highest level in OPEL, or is it to have turnaround times at the ED, which are X, Y, and Z, as opposed to... So I think that would begin to maybe clarify. I think if we were taking assurance on the process which we're looking at, I think it would be very good. I think what I need to understand in terms of what is it we think would be a good outcome for us in terms of our preparedness for winter, all other things being equal. Obviously, if things were to dramatically change in terms of service pressures, I know when Pam and I were talking about this at the Health and Social Care Committee, it seemed to me that the only thing that's changing now between summer and winter is the state of the weather, and we know, and it's hard to believe, but I'm sure it will be, but it's hard to believe that the system could actually get any busier, because there must be a point where you say, well, we're as busy as we can be. So I think it's thinking about things like that. So for me, it's thinking about what our success measures might be, and I'm not looking for anybody to say it'll be X or it'll be Y, but it's things like, I mean, I think every year I ask about the Flow Navigation Centre and whether that's actually making the positive impact that we're hoping that it would make, and I don't think anybody's been able to commit to date on it actually being what ideally we would like it to be. But have we set ourselves a target for the number of discharges that actually happen before noon? Because I know we would aspire to discharge before noon, but how many of our discharges actually happen before noon? And so to me that ties into the assurance in terms of how much of our own measure, how many measures have we got, and how are we able to achieve those? But so that's where I am at the moment, Sarah. But I think as a paper, I was really pleased with the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. And just before I bring David in, you picked up a point that I'd written down in my notebook as well. So it's winter preparedness, or is it really just surge planning? Because it's obviously winter has, particular pressures potentially, but actually, right, Jerry, is it that different from when it's busy at other times of the year? And perhaps we need to stop calling it winter preparedness and start reframing it a little. Okay, I'm going to bring David in next.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a couple of different ways we can look at the measurements of success. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is make sure that we maintain our performance around both scheduled and unscheduled care through the period. And when the system goes into a very extreme situation, that we're able to then respond to that and then be able to bring it back quickly. So in many ways, the monitoring of this, not so much as a plan, but actually as the ability to maintain those services, are very much part of our operational performance, and that will be reviewed on a much more regular basis than the board can do as a whole. But it most certainly will reflect back into the performance reports that come to the subcommittees of the board's Finance, Performance and Resources Committee, would be the first port of call, and ultimately back to the board. So we'll make sure that the thread of the performance is maintained through the winter period. But as I say, the reality is we'll be monitoring the effect of what we're able to do. And with any plan, we may have to change things as we go, and recognise that there will be some things that will have more effect than others, and maybe we'll then have to go into areas that we hadn't originally planned to. But I think as it's set out as a plan, then it's set before you today. But the monitoring, you can be assured, will continue in the background.
Thanks, David. Pam, did you want to come in before I bring Anne back in with her other questions?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure it's completely the same, but I'll just come in since I'm
okay.
So just a couple of things from me. I mean, I think winter's going. We know that everybody is, concerned about winter again, just as we were last year. That is this. That every year it feels really difficult now going into winter, because of what others have said and the fact that it doesn't really let up anyway. We did have really good processes and escalation and responses last year, so we know that what we put in place, just as Lorraine said and Pam said, it's a good framework. People liked it, they recognised it, they're now familiar with it. That doesn't make it any easier in terms of the human experience of working in that system. So I think within this, the other bit we need to make sure, whilst we've said in the risks about the importance of staff wellbeing, we probably need to be very explicit about what our offer is to staff in terms of the support across the system for those days when it really gets a little bit beyond the norm, or a lot beyond the norm, and the acknowledgement that people's resilience might be depleted because they haven't really had a let up. So I'd like to see a bit about that. I guess also exercising, as we did last year, exercising the plan so that people get a chance to do a desktop exercise as they did last year. That keeps everybody familiar and also gives them a chance to try out different scenarios and see if there's any further learning. But I think the assurance one is interesting, is it? Because I do believe that we've got a really robust framework, but in terms of impact, we're probably pretty certain that we're going to continue to have really difficult days where we won't be able to do everything that we wanted to do, that we'll have to stand down services. And that's not a place anybody wants to go. But I think, the patterns of the moment and the demand and the capacity and the challenges that we've got tells us that that's likely to be the scenario. And therefore, in terms of impact, no matter how much we put around this, it's unlikely that we will be able to say that we will preserve everything 100%. It's all going to be good. And then actually, it's very likely that we'll have days when our performance will dip significantly. I guess that's the assurance bit, is that it's not for the want of trying to do everything to the standard. And to some degree, using a lot of the tactics that we've used to date and previously. And again, brings us right back to, gosh, what takes us to a different place? And that is the worry bit that we spend a lot of our time trying to resolve. So I think that I'm not sure. I guess it's the explanation of what our assurance level means that might be the most important, rather than, it's back to what's the explanation for that assurance.
Thanks, Pam. Anne, I'll bring you in now, please.
Okay, so Pam's actually raised one of my points, which was about staff well-being and what additional measures we might be able to put in place in that space looking forward. if I could just though also come back and comment on the what are we trying to achieve issues. So for me, and the paper and the plans are certainly improving in this area. One of the key things is that the plans and the outcomes are very much a whole system response, and I suppose measure and highlight the pressures and the potential quality issues in the community and social care areas as much as in our hospitals. So just, you know, from my point of view, that's a really important part of both our plans and our outcomes. And just specifically in relation to that, it's great that we are doing work to develop a whole system approach to OPAL. I just wondered when we could possibly expect to have completed the actions that would be necessary to have a focus in OPAL on social care and our community health services as well as our hospitals. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. And I don't know who's going to pick that up. Pam Cremin, please.
Thanks, Anne, for your question. Yes, just in terms of OPAL, we've been developing that at pace. So we've got an OPAL system that we're testing within our mental health services, and an OPAL system that we're testing across our community services, including our adult social care. And we're currently scenario testing, so the same learning from the way that it was set up in acute, then looking at our scoring, looking at the scenarios, looking at the articulations we need to make. A big area of development we need to do is just agree the action cards with acute, so in terms of getting that into a whole system OPAL. And what we are recognising is important is that when acute go into OPAL status, for example, then there's a push on to the community where the community is a pool system, but what will be a good outcome will be to show the whole system in terms of the outputs through the whole process, and where people are at the end of the process, and how we work with other partners and other organisations to create more capacity at pace. So we are working on that work, and we're currently testing, and we would hope to have it ready within the start of the winter planning framework and plan that Lorraine has outlined. So we're in a state of testing and in a state of readiness for that. Thank you.
Thanks. And I see Lorraine popped her hand up there as well, so I'll bring you in, Lorraine.
Yeah, and as Pam said, I guess it's the whole system response to that level of pressure and how we act as a whole system. So it's that bringing together of the three OPALs into, how do we support that? I think for intelligence, each of the improvement actions last year had a specific performance indicator to cover Jerry and Anne's points that we then reviewed and looked at. I guess where were the points that we should take action because we seen them starting to go in a direction that we didn't want to, and adopt that kind of tactical approach to what we were, what action we were taking through the weekly meetings. So we do need to do that work again this year to highlight to the services if, if 6, they're all going the wrong way, how are we reacting to that? Or if there are 2 points going up on our graphs, that indicate a pressure, how are we reacting to that? So that will certainly be part of how we measure that this year. But I think there is a part about taking what are our 6 key data things that we need to get right, because there'll be, as I highlighted, there's a suite of 38 indicators, but what are the 5, 6 things that we really, really closely monitor and they can't go, in the wrong direction, or if they do, we need to take very quick action. So we do need to discuss that with the integrated SLT. Just to provide that assurance.
Thanks, Lorraine. Just before we come back to bottom out the assurance level, I had a quick question for Ruth Fry, actually, around the comms. So, and again, I've lost the page because I was listening to the conversation, but I think we talked about all the work that went on last year around comms out to communities and how well that worked, and the messaging that took place. And picking up, I think there was a comment that said, you know, social media was a really good tool for us to do that because we could do it rapidly and, you know, it can flex. I was just wondering, has there been any learning from doing that last year? Have we identified, did we miss groups of people? Were there people, I mean, we know that some people are more engaged with social media and others are not. Is there anything that we could take from last year that we can add to that comms profile to pick out anybody who we didn't quite manage to engage with last year? Ruth.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it's a really good question and something we look at every year around our winter comms and how we can improve based on what we've learned from previous years. So yes, we know that social media is a good way to engage with communities. I suppose for winter comms and pressures, what we're looking at is to try and reach people really at the point that they're about to engage with services. So social media is probably more effective in terms of the ongoing background messaging, but we also need to think about how can we reach people at the point where they're maybe about to pick up the phone to a GP, or they may be going into a pharmacist, or indeed they may be about to get in the car and nip to the nearest A&E or minor injuries department. So we need to look at that sort of point of messaging communications as well. And I think also think about the whole system. So it's not just about people coming in the front door for the pressures there, but also around, you know, what can we do to increase flow? So that might be looking at more specific campaigns around things like early discharge, getting picked up early from hospital. It might be something around volunteering, for example, and indeed prevention. Of course, things like how can we help people to stay healthy and well as well. So that's all the things that we're starting to pick up now as we come into winter.
Thanks, Ruth. Joanne.
Hi, just picking up on your last comment, Sarah and Ruth. I just wondered about where the kind of partnership work is going on around the comms in regard to spreading the message and actually getting to patients on the ground. This is all very high level, but we have had conversations at other meetings about people not knowing where to call, what to do, or you know, increased calls to 111. And it was around for me about how we get the message to the patients, and you know, how do we actually let them know and understand what they're meant to be doing, and if there's changes to wait times and flows in hospitals, the impact on the patient at patient level. And I wondered if we could be, if we're utilising partnership through third sector to the full extent to try and get the message out on a very local level, because I'm aware, as kind of Sarah commented, that there's a lot of people not on social media, and there's a lot of people don't really read newspapers or that anymore. So how are we actually getting to the most vulnerable people? Thank you.
Go for it, Ruth.
So I think I can answer that to some extent again. So there is national messaging and national campaigns around what's called right care, right place, about accessing care appropriately. So that does include an element of advertising across all channels. So yes, there's social media. We're also considering whether we can work jointly with Grampian on a radio campaign. At the national level, there'll be television advertising, for example, around some of these messages. And we do look at particular audiences that are relevant to us. So last year, one of the things we tried around falls prevention was press advertising, again, to reach that particular group who we knew perhaps were less active online. We've also previously targeted our large amount of tourists that we get in the area by publicising some of our contact information in the leaflets and so on that are put out in self-caterings and hotels in the area. So we do go across as wide a range of channels as possible. So I suppose it's really about making sure that that information is easy to find when people need to find it. So that, you know, when that accident happens or someone's got a query and they think maybe I do need to access health and care services, they might not have remembered the messaging, but they'll know exactly where they can find it. So it needs to be really across the board. So it needs to be online, it needs to be in print, and it needs to be really accessible and consistent.
Thanks, Ruth. And I see Fiona put her hand up. I was actually going to ask Fiona and Pam potentially, because I suppose I was thinking about our connections with our third sector interfaces, and obviously they have massive networks across all our communities. But Fiona, you popped your hand up, so I'll bring you in.
Well, thanks, Chair. I suppose that I was just reflecting on Joanne's question, and many of our most vulnerable members of our population are already under our care in one form or another. So we have a huge opportunity through our existing clinical and care relationships to do anticipatory planning, to be thinking with people what might happen if their long-term condition exacerbates or worsens over the winter period. Because, of course, some of our unscheduled care activity does relate to an unexpected fall or an accident, these types of things. But many of our unscheduled care contacts are with people that have a long-term condition, or indeed multiple long-term conditions that have been exacerbated by winter conditions or a change in presentation. So I think we also have to work with our teams who are working flat out, but to encourage them to have those conversations with people directly about what would be the best thing to do and what the right route for them is, given that there has been some changes in some of the ways that we deliver our care pathways in unscheduled care times. Just picking up then, Chair, your point in regard of third sector interface, certainly within Argyll and Bute, our winter planning incorporates all of our partners because, well, we can't do anything by ourselves. So, you know, we are working broadly with our carer centres, with our other third sector bodies, to help get the message out to people what it is that they need to do to keep themselves well. But if there is an unexpected event or an unscheduled care event, that they know how to get the right care at the right time in their locality. Thanks.
Thanks, Fiona. Lorraine, Pam, Lorraine. I'll take you first, Lorraine, and then Pam, you can sort of sandwich it.
Yeah, and just for assurance, last year we had Mary Wiley, who was involved from that third sector interface perspective, so that we were, you know, reaching out, as Joanne has pointed out, with our messaging and with our planning, importantly. So that will happen again this year as we develop that group.
Okay, that's good. Pam Crennan, please.
Thanks, and just to build on Fiona's point and reflect for the Highland Partnership, we've got a number of conduits who can bring the message, you know, and who are engaged with, you know, our different sector partners. We've got our daily district management teams. We've got good surveillance on the people in our community who we can be proactive about. And just in terms of conduits and engagement, then just around our winter planning, you know, when we're out meeting with our multidisciplinary teams, I had a good engagement session with our teams down in Aviemore just on Friday there. So that engaged the GP, some of our community staff, our pharmacists, etc. So having that conversation and bringing into all of our conversations when we are a conduit and a messenger just around our preparedness for winter planning, looking at being solution focused and looking at co-producing joint ideas to take forward. So certainly we've been getting the message out, and I'll make sure that through the district management teams and that daily team meeting that they have, that they are explicitly engaging with their sector partners just around all elements, so that we get that communication and engagement right. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. So lots of opportunities there. Okay, Anne, I'll bring you in next.
Sorry, Sarah, I wasn't sure if we were coming back to that point about staff well-being that was raised by Pam and myself. I'm thinking, for example, have we evaluated Project Wingman? Is that's something that we might be thinking about using again? Where are we at with staff vaccination? You know, are there additional wellbeing measures that we think we need to put in place? I'm not sure what we think the learning from last year was about that particular aspect of the plans. So I just wondered if anybody would like to comment specifically on where we think we're at with the reassure theme of our overview. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. And I don't know if Gareth, you maybe want to come in on staff wellbeing stuff through that particular lens, or I don't know, Lorraine, but I'll bring you in first, Gareth.
I suppose where we're at the moment is, yes, we're evaluating the Project Windman interventions. We have a range of supports for staff through occupational health. We've invested heavily in that. Again, I think some of that is noted in the report earlier today in relation to the Leadership and Culture paper. So I think there's elements of seeking reassurance that we are focused on health and wellbeing as an organisation, and I suppose it's think about what we can do in addition to that. I think the day-to-day, and again, there's a complex interaction, not complex, there's an interaction between what are the mitigating actions we can take. So the other aspects we need to look at are, do we have enough staff in the places that they should be, and that's an element of related to OPEL, and think about staffing we talked about earlier today. So I think assurance around we do have processes in place to make sure that we have supplementary staffing requested where we have shortages, etc., as demonstrated by use of supplementary staffing. I think the pressures that are then in the system are around the quality of care that can be provided given the pressures in relation to the number of patients and facilities, etc. So there's a number of complex factors that are in there, and I suppose what would help staff in that space in terms of reassurance that we are taking their concerns seriously, given the reassurance we're doing what we can. So I think this plan in itself is important, recognising and acknowledging that we are cognizant of what the pressures are that they're undertaking. I do need to work a bit more with Lorraine in terms of what else we can maybe put into the paper, but I'm happy to take further comments from other colleagues as well.
Thanks, Gareth. And I know that Pam and Catherine popped their hands up while you were talking there. So Pam, I'll bring you in next.
Yeah, I mean, we can pick this up out with the board and look further at it. We invested in chaplaincy last year, for instance, in the staff support function, which evaluates very, very well. Good feedback from staff on that. But I would think alongside our staff side colleagues, we should just spend a bit of time on this, and from all the learning that we've got, be a bit more clear about what the 3 or 4 things are that we're going to do, or what the offer is. So I think we can take that out of this arrangement and definitely update the board on that. Okay.
No, that sounds good. Thank you, Pam. Catherine, your hand went down, so I'm assuming that you were going to say the same thing, but happy if you want to come in as well.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's always more that we can do. And Pam's mentioned some of those things, but just to reassure that there are, arrangements in place, particularly around the front door and the more acute areas of the acute system and the hospitals in particular, in terms of supporting staff where there have been adverse incidents or adverse patient outcomes as a natural course of delivering service. And we also review all datexes that are raised every week at a formal meeting that's chaired by our Associate Nurse Director and Deputy Medical Director. So there's a fair amount of work going on in that space. I do think, and for your benefit, the Project Wingman evaluated very, very well. I think there's something for me as well around being really responsive. So when staff are raising concerns, that we get in and around, hear them and respond to that as well. And that's certainly something that I think the staff really value. So it's just how we do that and ensure that the right capacity is available to do that when it needs to happen. But I would agree with everything else that's been said. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Catherine. That's really helpful. Okay, not seeing any other hands up, but we do need to go back and bottom out the assurance level. So having listened to the conversation and thinking about the risks, or I guess the pressures and the pressures that we know are coming, my view would be that we leave the level of assurance at limited, particularly given that there had been that discussion internally, and that's not a reflection on the level of work that has gone into this, because clearly there's a massive amount of work that has gone into this, and the approach is robust, and the paper is good. So I think we're all really happy with that. But picking up on the comments in the paper around why the level of assurance is limited, I would be proposing that we keep it there. Obviously we will see how things go, and also just to reflect on the national focus on winter planning and the the kind of the focus on it from that perspective. I would be comfortable leaving it at limited for now. But yeah, absolutely recognising the great work that's gone into this. Are people happy with that approach? Great. The other alternative is that we split it into lots of different parts and assure each different bit, but we're not doing that. Okay, good. Right, we'll leave it at limited just now, and we shall move on. So we are now on to item number 11. So this is our corporate risk register, and I'm going to invite Boyd to speak to this item, please.
Thanks, Chair and board members. This is our regular item of the risk register at strategic or board level. Colleagues know that this is an iterative document, and based on a recent board development session, we would anticipate that future versions will differ again. You will notice in this one that we've got some milestones included in terms of what the actions are around the risks, and that's a new feature. I also anticipate, based on recent discussions and indeed some of today's board session, that we will align our strategic risks more with our board strategy, but also with some of the issues that have been mentioned today, so that if our objectives are to do X and Y through the winter, as we've just discussed, what are the risks to achieving those objectives, and which of those should be at the strategic level and which should be reflected further down and then somehow incorporated at a higher level in more general high-level risk. So a brief preamble to the paper, which is submitted for colleagues. You should be familiar with it, and with that introduction and more to come in the next board meeting, I'll maybe stop there, Chair, to invite questions or comments.
Thanks, Boyd. And colleagues might be all risked out, because obviously we had that really good risk appetite session where we got really in and about our approach to risk, but happy if people have any questions or comments about the risk register specifically and the risks that we're seeing in front of us today. Susan, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Boyd. I liked seeing the milestones. I think it's really helpful to have that, but the one I didn't like seeing was the one that said ongoing, so I'm not fond of a milestone that's ongoing. Just a little picky thing.
Susan, help me find that one. Is that under 101?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll note that it's helpful to get feedback as ever, and so the comment is noted, and we'll take that away and work on it.
Thanks, Boyd. Okay, any other questions or comments about the risk register? No. Okay, so just to recap, we were being asked to examine it and consider the evidence provided, and Boyd, sorry, just to pick up, what in the covering bit, anything proposed to close or added, but
yeah, we haven't really got any great material change in the overall risks. However, I do think we will see that It's up to partly to the governance committees. It's probably up to executive directors group, and we will. There's some comment in the paper about the forthcoming risk appetite statement, and what will happen for future version is that you'll see, you know, we've worked on it collectively as a board, so we'll bring a paper about the risk appetite, but we'll also see that risk appetite approach reflected in the board risk register, the strategic risk register here. So we'll, to try and get consistency of approach, and as we have agreed in our development session, to help the organisation with the messaging and practice of risk expression. And so you will see some changes with the next version or two as a result.
That's helpful. Thank you, Boyd. I just wanted to check that I hadn't missed something. So examine it and consider the evidence provided, and we agree that we're happy with what's in there at the moment, and note the risk management process with alignment to the strategy. That will come to the next meeting, and it's proposed that we can take substantial assurance around the corporate risk register. Are members content with that? Thumbs up. Lovely. Okay, that takes us on to item number 12. Sorry, I forgot how to read numbers for a second there. Item number 12, this is our Audit Committee Annual Report for 2022-23. I'll invite Ruth to speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Sarah. So I don't actually have anything further to add to the annual report that's there. The Audit Committee, naturally, is at the end of the cycle of producing its own annual report because it has to look through all the other Governance Committee annual reports before it can do that. So it's there for you to endorse at this meeting. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And I don't know, not to put you on the spot, but just to check, if Gaynor wanted to add anything at this point. You don't, no pressure, but just to give you the opportunity if you wanted to come in.
No, I've got nothing to add. It's all in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaynor. Any questions, comments? We're being asked to take substantial assurance and to note this report. No, okay, we're good. Thumbs up. That takes us to item number 13. Which is our board and committee meetings timetable for 2024. Ruth?
Thank you, yes. So the report details all of the board and committee meeting dates proposed for 2024. The dates have been agreed by the individual governance committees, with the exception of the remuneration committee, which hasn't yet met to look at them. So those are the ones that are going to be proposed to the remuneration committee. I'm also aware that there are some changes afoot for the audit committee meeting dates as well, to align with the internal audit reporting, and further confirmation to be brought to the board as soon as possible on that. So that it's there for your approval at today's meeting, and we will bring any changes back to you as soon as we possibly can before 2024.
Thanks, Ruth. Just before I bring, well, Gaynor might be bringing in this point, actually, what we're not seeing on here, though, is the IJB dates, which I know is not, that's for the IJB to agree, but I suppose that's where potentially in the past we've had some clashes where we have board members here who need to attend the IJB and the subcommittees of the IJB, but also our own meetings as well. So I don't know, Gaynor, I'll bring you in. I don't know if I've just stolen your point or if you've got something different to add.
No, you haven't, but I agree about the IGB meetings. It would be helpful. It was just to update committee that audit committee are hoping to move the April date to a March date in order to fit in better with our internal audit schedule. But all the other dates should remain the same. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Philip, please.
Yeah, a similar point to you, Sarah. Just for completeness, it might be quite handy to have the endowment committee dates recorded here, just so we have a full picture.
Okay,
absolutely. Can do that. I can do that for the next meeting if you'd like.
I wonder if Fiona, sorry to put you on the spot, do we know when the IJB dates are going to go through that bit of the machine?
No.
We can ask Charlotte offline and bring it back. So shall we say then that we are going to approve these dates as they stand right now, but appreciating that we need to add in endowments, make the tweak that Gaynor advised us of, and then feed in the IJB dates once that process has been completed. And of course, I fully expect you to know what all of you are doing for all of 2024 and to have these in your diary nice and promptly. So is everybody happy with that? Obviously there's a few more dates to feed in, but are we happy to take this just as it is at the moment? Louise?
Yeah, I think, unless I'm reading it wrong, I've noticed a clash between Staff Governance and Audit Committee being on the same morning. Is it possible to just make sure that we haven't got any clashes that, or morning and afternoon dates that are going to be a bit tricky for folk?
Yes, because we can't yet split ourselves in half, unfortunately. Do we want, I'm just wondering, Ruth, do we want to take this away actually and feed in the other stuff? Just because I'm thinking there's a couple of changes now. Okay, let's do that just because obviously Louise has picked up and we've got a couple of other things that we need to feed in. So so just pencil these into your diaries, everybody. Don't put it in biro just yet, and then we'll bring it back once we've fed in a few more things, and then you can commit yourselves. Okay, great. Lovely. That takes us on to agenda item number 14. This is our approved Gaelic plan for 2023 to 2028. And I think, Gareth, are you introducing this one? But I'm pretty sure I saw Nicola joining as well. So
you did.
Over to you guys.
Yeah. So I will hand over to Nicola. I joined the board recently, so all the major legwork on this has been done by others. As you'll note from the plan, there's a range of responsibilities across the plan. Key to success around this will be implementation and how we set this up going forwards to make sure we actually deliver on the actions in the plan. But I'll let Nicola speak to it in further, and then we'll open for questions. Over to you, Nicola. Okay.
Afternoon, everybody. I think you've just said everything I was going to say anyway, Gareth. It's been a long time coming. You approved the plan almost a year ago. So in a way, we've lost a wee bit of momentum. So now that it's finally been approved by Borscht Gaelic, quite excited to be getting things up and running again. We have to do a launch. We received the formal letter of approval last week. So we have to launch the plan within 3 months of the date of approval. And then we'll just start getting some positive messages out through the internal comms again. We'll start up the more regular videos. We've had some good feedback about Gaelic classes. So we'd like to start a new series of classes as well. And as Gareth said, the really important points are around being able to find the time and budget to implement, especially the high level aims, and also the effectiveness of the Gaelic implementation group, which requires the appropriate people from the various departments. And I'll be working with Gareth around who the best people are within each department for that. But that's really it. It was just to ask yourselves as a board to endorse it and to really urge department heads to encourage people to get involved as much as possible. I actually had a meeting yesterday with somebody from Highland Council who is involved in the Dementia Scotland sessions that are running locally. So I asked if I could kind of maybe get involved in those conversations as well, because that's one of the areas where we've seen that there's real improvement and positive effects on patients. So that's really it. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, hopefully this is the start of something new.
Thanks, Nicola. Really welcome that, and yeah, you're right. Is it a shame we had a little bit of that kind of gap in there? So it's really good to see this coming back approved and ready for that launch. And sorry, apologies if I missed it in the papers, but I wonder if you could say just a little bit more about actually the launch and what that might entail, and perhaps if there's opportunity for board members to be involved in that, or how we can support that, just to make sure that gets off to a good start.
Yeah, it's not in the papers because I didn't actually realise that the launch was part of it until we got the letter from Bosch na Gaelic last week. So it's up to yourselves how big a launch that needs to be, and who needs to be involved. But I'm happy to work with whoever. Would it be with Pam and Ruth possibly around an actual event for the launch? But certainly, you know, if board members would be able to be part of that, that would be great.
Okay, well, it sounds like there's maybe some conversations to happen offline around what might be in the art of the possible and how we want to do that. And we look forward to hearing more about that. And it might be that, I mean, I'm kind of ad-libbing here, but I don't know if there might be portions of that. Maybe there would be some online element to a launch as well, perhaps. I don't know, but we'll wait and see. We look forward to hearing more about that, and if we can, that can be circulated around board members and we can support in any way that we can. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments? Obviously, we had seen this a while back, but happy if anybody's got any questions or comments for Nicola before we note that plan as now approved. No, okay, so we are, oops, sorry, I've lost my place. We are being asked to take moderate assurance from the plan and obviously note that it has now been approved. Are members happy with that? Great. And we look forward to hearing about any launch activity, and we'll support that as best we can. Lovely. Right, now we are on to section number 15. So this is our the reports from our various governance committees. So I'll be going around and inviting chairs to draw out any highlights, and members can also ask any questions. Now, unfortunately, we don't have Alec with us today, but the first item up there is the minutes of the FRP, sorry, the Finance, Resource and Performance Committee from the 8th of September. I don't know what we'll maybe do if people have questions or comments about that, and then we can pick up kind of between us. So I'll just pause, or I don't know if any other members of FRP are able to draw out any highlights. That would be helpful. Graham.
I'm not sure we can draw out highlights because you got the discussion on it this morning. So I don't really have anything to add other than what we covered earlier.
Thanks, Graham. Okay, that's fine. We'll move on to Highland Health and Social Care Committee. Jerry, I will give you a moment if there's anything you want to draw our attention to.
No, the minutes there, happy to take any question. And I think the only observations, but I think this is fairly common to everybody. We had a really long agenda, and I think I tried the patience of everyone by the length of the meeting. And given that I escalated last time the absence of the finance report, it would be remiss of me not to raise this time. We had an excellent update from Elaine on the financial position, so my thank you to Helen and her team for getting that to us. But no, most of the other issues are just highlighted on the agenda, and we've picked on the minute, and we picked a few things up as we went along today. So thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Jerry. I'll just quickly pause. Any questions or comments for Jerry? No. Okay, that moves us on to the Clinical Governance Committee. Alistair.
Yeah, thank you. The 4 items that I was going to raise, 2 of them have been covered by Pam Dudek in her item this morning, which was the challenges around recruitment and also the general pressures on the service, which the Clinical Governance Committee fully recognised and discussed. The other items were the ongoing situation with dentistry, which has been a concern for the Clinical Governance Committee as to how people in the communities access NHS dentistry services, and we had an update on that. And the final item I was going to raise, we covered under the Integrated Performance Equality Report, which was the current situation with NDAS and the number of referrals that they're getting. So all the things that I was going to raise on behalf of the committee have really been covered elsewhere on the agenda today.
Thanks, Alistair. Anne.
So Sarah, I had flagged to Alistair and he was happy for me to just clarify something from the minutes of the committee, which refer to a couple to some questions I asked and a couple of points in the minutes, and I just wanted to clarify for everybody that the question I was posing was around whether our assurance to committee and board was sufficient around patient safety and quality, given the system pressures that we're under and that we've discussed a lot today, particularly in relation to what gets reported to us around performance in the emergency department. So I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't challenging the performance of our emergency department, which is probably nothing short of remarkable, really, in the current circumstances. I was asking a question about whether our assurance and governance arrangements were sufficiently detailed in terms of what's happening within our emergency department, particularly in relation to 12-hour waits and Scottish ambulance response times. So I've since had good assurance from Lorraine. Thank you very much, Lorraine, for responding to that, that is being reviewed as part of our winter planning arrangements, and that members of staff will be considering the points that I raised and coming back to the November meeting with a view on that. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I felt it sounded from the minutes as though I was challenging the performance of the emergency department, which was not what it was about at all. And that's not a reflect. The rest of the minute was absolutely excellent. I obviously was expressing myself very badly that day. Thanks.
That's a really helpful clarification, Anne. Thank you. I didn't read it that way, but that's really helpful just to clear that up. Thank you. And I can see that Boyd popped his hand up there, so I'll bring you in now, Boyd.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I managed to miss a fair bit of that particular meeting as I was in the company of the Chief Medical Officer in Edinburgh that day. What I would say is we have heard a bit about winter, we've heard about flow, we've heard about system pressures. Now we're talking about the Clinical Governance Committee, and helpfully we've just had a little discussion on what is assurance and governance and how do we see the system. I've done some work. I would report to board verbally to see what measurements of safety and quality of care further can be brought in addition to the existing ones to Clinical Governance Committee to try and answer that very difficult to answer question, particularly at the time when we know that systems across all health boards and all hospitals in the UK, never mind Scotland, are struggling in the post-pandemic era. And so we will probably see a development of existing metrics and how they are reported, how we look at that safety, and also how we balance what the numbers can tell us, also with the very real experiences in a case-to-case basis that frontline staff will see in their daily duties. And so that will in effect constitute additional work and analysis that will come into the Clinical Governance Committee, and I think should in time as we develop it be reflected in board papers, will be consistent with what's being developed by government and some of the metrics that I heard mentioned that Lorraine Cowie and yourself were involved in. And there are other checklists and ways of looking at what is clearly a system that has particular challenges across the country at this time. So we will see that in papers in the future as we develop that further suite.
Thanks, Lloyd. Okay. Just pause for a minute and check there's nothing else for clinical governance. Nope. Okay. So area clinical forums, we don't have Katrina today, do we? She was gave her apologies. If anybody's got any questions or comments for ACF, we can always obviously take a note of those and take them offline and bring them back. Nope. Okay. I'll just take those as read. Audit committee from the 5th of September. I'll invite Gaynor.
Thank you, Chair. The Audit Committee took 2 internal audit reports, one on communications and the other on property transaction monitoring, and the discussion around those are in the paper. I think we've started to catch up quite well with looking at our management follow-up and any outstanding audit actions, so we're keeping on top of those as best we can. Boyd spoke to us again about risk management going forward, which was really interesting. And we also had Audit Scotland come and report to committee about one of their papers. We also had, and have every meeting, quite a good discussion on counter fraud. And so I'm proposing that the February date that we have in our diary will be a development session for Audit Committee, and we'll invite counter fraud services to come and speak to committee on that, because there's a new strategy being launched very soon and a counter fraud action plan also being launched. Hopefully we'll have them to committee in December. So yeah, but the minutes are there. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaynor. Any questions or comments for Gaynor? Nope. Okay, perfect. That takes us on to staff governance. I'll invite Anne.
Thanks, Sarah. So we've obviously discussed today a number of items that were on our agenda for staff governance, so I won't go into them. In addition to those, I think it was good to hear about the piece of work that is happening in relation to Statman training, short life working group, and a deep dive into improving our performance in that area, which is of concern. So it was good to hear about that at committee. I think other than that, the most important item was our any other business, which was, of course, the letter from Scottish Government, from the CAPSEC, about our response to the shocking and tragic Lucy Letby case, and the minutes set out a summary of how we're approaching our response to that, which I would say is comprehensive and will involve all of our governance committees reviewing our effectiveness in relation to some of the issues raised by that case. So other than that, happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. That's really helpful. And I suppose just to people be aware, but we discussed that not only at staff governance, but in various other informal settings. And there was a robust response went back, as it did from all boards, to Cabinet Secretary on it for some assurance around our systems and our approach there. Any questions or comments for Anne for staff governance? No? Okay, thank you, Anne. And last but by no means least, the Argyll and Bute IJB. I'll invite Graham, please.
Yeah, you've got the notes there. Not much to add. This is our compressed time. We have another one tomorrow. And of course, I'll be sleepless with excitement waiting on the surprise that Fiona is going to give us, as she promised earlier, about an exciting new project coming in Argyll and Bute. So you'll all have to wait till November to hear that one. So, but no, happy to take any questions or comments, and I'm not sure if Fiona wants to come in at all on anything there.
No, just that you've made them all jealous now that they're not all on the IJB, Graham.
I mean, I'm hoping that we might speak to each other before November at some point, perhaps. I don't know. Okay, any questions for Graham around the IJB? And you can't ask him what the surprise is. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much to all the committee chairs. So, any other competent business before we close our meeting today? Dana.
Sorry, Chair, just a plug. This is Climate Week and we have a number of staff across NHS Highland that have been involved in some fantastic things that contribute to NHS's response to the climate emergency. So I believe if you're in the Belford, then staff will have stuff up that you can go and look at, and they're encouraging people to log their active travel to work. The same thing is happening in the main entrance at Raigmore, where there are a few posters up and some staff there to speak to both visitors, patients and other staff members coming in and out of the main entrance. So there'll also be a staff health walk running on Wednesday and Thursday at 12:30 from the main Raigmore entrance. So feel free to come along, and the message is out there to staff to also feel free to come along and chat to us. We've had lots of people speak to us already, so it's been really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaynor. And I feel a bit embarrassed now because I had actually meant to talk about that at the beginning of the meeting and it completely slipped my mind. And I don't know how, because there've been lots and lots of emails, and you're right, there's lots of activity happening. And what's, I think, probably really exciting about that activity is a lot of it is kind of, well, is grassroots. It's people, you know, ideas that they're coming up with themselves in all different parts of the business. So I am so sorry, Gaynor. I had completely gone out of my head. So thank you very much for raising that. And I think that Pam D is going to pick that up in her vlog tomorrow as well. And it's good that you reminded us, Gaynor, of all the stuff that's happening. And because of course you are our champion, so fulfilling the champion role. Thank you very much. So I would encourage everybody to check that out and get involved if you're out and about. That would be great. Okay, good. That was a good any other business. I thought you were gonna. Didn't know what you were gonna throw at me there. So that was a good one. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the close. And as if you could forget, our next board meeting is on the 28th of November at 9:30 in the morning, but we will of course see each other in between then. Thank you very much for your time today, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye.